Okay, so you want to own a car dealership, buy some land, put up a shiny building, park a few hundred cars on it, and watch people hand you money. That's the picture in your head. Local car dealer, richest guy in town, drives whatever he wants, retires at 50. Here's the problem. Almost none of that is how this business actually works. Let's start with the illusion, because the illusion is doing a lot of work here. Across the country, there are roughly 17,000 franchised new car dealers. Between them, they move more than 16 million vehicles a year, and the total sales figure for that industry crosses $1.3 trillion. On top of that, dealers write more than 276 million repair orders a year, and the service and parts side alone brings in over $164 billion, big numbers. The kind of numbers that make a normal person think, I want in, but here's the part nobody tells you. Despite moving over $1 trillion a year in cars, the average dealership keeps somewhere between 1% and 2.5% of that as actual profit. Not 7%, not 15%. 1 to 2.5. Sell a car for $10,000, and if everything goes right, the dealership might clear somewhere between $100 and $250 once every single cost is accounted for. So how does an industry with margins that thin produce some of the richest people in every American town? That's the entire question this video is going to answer. And the answer has almost nothing to do with the cars themselves. Let's start with what you're actually buying into. There are 3 doors you can walk through: mainstream franchise, luxury franchise, or independent used car lot. Each one is a completely different business wearing the same sign out front. A mainstream franchise, something like Ford or Toyota or Chevrolet, runs on volume. Low margin per car, but the manufacturer throws national advertising, brand recognition, and subsidized financing behind you. In exchange, you answer to the manufacturer on almost everything. Facility design, mandatory renovations, inventory you're told you'll receive whether you asked for it or not. Luxury franchises flip the equation. Fewer cars move through the lot, but each one carries a much fatter margin, and the buyers aren't nearly as rattled by a bad month in the economy. The luxury segment is also expected to keep growing at somewhere between 8 and 14% a year, driven by a simple fact. The number of wealthy people in the world keeps climbing. The catch is the buy-in. Building a facility that meets luxury manufacturer standards costs dramatically more than a standard showroom. Then there's the independent used car lot. No manufacturer looking over your shoulder, no mandated renovations, no allocation politics. Just you, a fence, and a wholesale auction account. It's the cheapest way into the business by far. It's also the weakest. Independent lots don't get a warranty repair department, which we'll get to later, because that department turns out to be where a huge amount of the real money hides. They also have to arrange their own inventory financing, usually at worse rates than a franchise dealer gets, and they average around $1,500 profit per vehicle sold, compared to roughly $2,000 for a franchise dealer. So already, before you've spent a single dollar, the shape of the business is telling you something. The franchise model, expensive and restrictive as it is, wins over time. It's the only version of this business built to survive a bad year, because it stacks 3 separate profit engines on top of each other instead of relying on one. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to get through the front door. This is where the fantasy usually dies. A standard franchise dealership requires somewhere between $5 million and over $10 million just to open the doors. Not to get rich, just to open. It starts with the franchise fee itself, the check you write directly to the manufacturer for the right to sell their badge. For a brand like Ford, that fee can be as low as $30,000. For a premium import brand, it can run past $500,000. Then comes the land. A modern dealership needs somewhere between 4 and 8 acres, enough room for the showroom, the service bays, and enough parking to store the enormous rolling inventory a dealer is required to carry. Depending on how you build, a pre-engineered metal structure runs somewhere between $120 and $150 per square foot. A concrete tilt-up build, the kind manufacturers often require for luxury brands, runs between $250 and $450 per square foot, and manufacturers don't just want a building, they want proof you can survive one. Most mainstream brands require somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in pure liquid capital sitting untouched, plus a total net worth somewhere between $2 million and $4 million. This isn't a suggestion. If you don't clear that bar, you don't get the franchise, no matter how much you want it. Add licensing, legal fees, and state bonding, somewhere between $25,000 and $100,000. Add technology, the dealer management software and diagnostic systems every modern dealership runs on, another $75,000 to $250,000. And that's before you've bought a single car to put on the lot, Which brings us to the part where the real money starts moving. Inventory. New cars don't work the way you'd expect. You don't call up the manufacturer and order what you think will sell. Manufacturers control the flow of new inventory through a system called turn and earn. The dealers who sell fast get rewarded with more of the best cars next cycle. The dealers who sell slowly get starved. It's a compounding cycle. The strong dealers get stronger, and the weak ones get stuck moving whatever's left over. Manufacturers also hold back somewhere between 10 and 15% of total production purely at their own discretion to reward performance or push dealers into facility upgrades they might not want to make. It's less a supply chain and more a political hierarchy with cars as the currency. Used cars are a different game entirely, sourced through trade-ins, lease returns, and wholesale auctions with names like Mannheim and Odessa aggregating hundreds of thousands of cars a week, open only to licensed dealers. But bidding at these auctions moves fast. A car can be bid on and sold in under a minute, and every purchase adds buyer's premiums running from $100 to $500, plus transportation costs that can run as high as $2,200 depending on distance. By the time you've paid the hammer price, the fees, the transport, and the reconditioning, that great deal you found at auction might only leave you a net margin of 5 to 6% once it's sitting on your lot with a price sticker on the window. None of this is paid in cash, by the way. Almost the entire inventory sitting on a dealership lot is financed through something called floor plan financing, a revolving credit line where a bank or the manufacturer's own lending arm fronts somewhere between 95 and 100% of the cost for a new vehicle and 75 to 90% for a used one. The dealer holds the metal, the lender holds the risk, and the moment a car sells, the loan on that specific car gets paid off immediately. Here's the trap most first-time owners walk straight into. That inventory sitting on the lot isn't neutral. It's bleeding money every single day it doesn't sell. Floor plan interest is typically priced at the benchmark lending rate, plus somewhere between 2 and 4 percentage points. When interest rates climb, and they climb whether you want them to or not, the cost of simply holding cars on your lot climbs with it. Add insurance, lot maintenance, and straight depreciation, and industry estimates put the daily holding cost of a single vehicle somewhere between $40 and $85 per car, per day. Now scale that. If you're sitting on 100 vehicles and your average turn time slips by just 10 days because of a slow month, that's an extra $40,000 to $85,000 gone in a single month for nothing. Not one extra dollar of revenue, just the cost of cars sitting still, and it gets worse the longer a car sits. Floor plan agreements usually include curtailment clauses. If a vehicle hasn't sold within 90 to 120 days, the lender forces you to start making principal payments out of your own pocket on a car you haven't sold yet. At that point, dealers are usually forced to slash the price just to get the thing off the lot before it becomes a bigger liability than it's worth. Sophisticated dealer groups fight back against this using an accounting method called last in first out, or LIFO. Under LIFO, the dealership assumes that the most recently purchased vehicle, usually the most expensive one due to inflation, is the first one counted as sold on paper. That inflates your cost of goods sold on the books, which shrinks your reported taxable profit. It's essentially an interest-free loan from the tax authorities, and for a large dealer group, it can defer hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax liability in a single year. It doesn't make the business more profitable. It just lets you keep more of the cash a little longer, so you've spent millions to open the doors. You're bleeding money on unsold inventory every single day. How does anyone make a living doing this? Here's where the whole picture flips, because the money isn't where you think it is. Everyone assumes the dealer makes their money on the sale of the car. That assumption is mostly wrong. The front-end margin, the profit on the actual metal, has been shrinking for years, thanks to the internet giving buyers instant access to invoice pricing and competing quotes. The average gross profit on a new vehicle sale recently dropped by around a third, down to roughly $2,247. Used cars offer a bit more room, generally somewhere between 12 and 15% gross margin, compared to around 7% on new. That's not nothing, but it's nowhere near enough to explain the wealth this industry produces. So where's the rest of it coming from? The finance and insurance office. The room you sit in after you've already agreed to buy the car, the one that feels like paperwork. That room generates close to 37% of a dealership's entire gross profit. Here's the mechanism. When you finance a car, the dealership isn't just connecting you to a bank. The bank offers the dealer a wholesale interest rate, called the buy rate. The dealer is then legally allowed to mark that rate up before presenting it to you. A 5% buy rate might show up on your paperwork as 7%. The dealership pockets the spread. It's called dealer reserve. and it's pure profit generated from nothing but a few percentage points on your loan. Then there's the extended warranty, technically called a vehicle service contract, and the gap insurance that covers the gap between what you owe and what the car is worth if it's totaled. These products carry brutal markups. A warranty that costs the dealership around $1,000 wholesale might be sold to you for $2,500 to $3,500, a markup of 50 to 200%. Well-run finance departments manage to attach one of these warranties to as many as 84% of all deals. That's not a rounding error. That's a second business running quietly inside the first one. Now here's the trick almost nobody outside the industry has ever heard of. Some dealership owners don't just sell these warranty products for a one-time commission. They set up their own offshore reinsurance companies, often places like Turks and Caicos or Nevis, structured specifically to hold tax advantages. When you buy that warranty, the premium doesn't just vanish into the manufacturer's pocket, it gets routed into the dealer's own captive insurance company. If your car never breaks down, or breaks down for less than what you paid in premium, the dealer keeps the entire underwriting profit. And under certain tax provisions, that underwriting profit can be exempt from standard taxation up to an annual cap in the millions. The cash sitting in these captive companies doesn't sit idle either. It gets invested in stocks and bonds, quietly compounding in the background, completely separate from whatever happens on the actual sales floor. That's the real secret of this industry. The car is basically the bait. The financing office is where the business happens. But even the finance office isn't the most profitable room in the building. That title belongs somewhere you'd never expect. The service department. Vast operations, meaning service, parts, and the collision center, typically account for only somewhere between 10 and 15% of a dealership's total revenue. And yet that small slice generates roughly half of the dealership's entire gross profit, because the margins back there run between 45 and 50% on labor and parts. Compare that to the low single digits you get selling the car itself. Why does this matter so much? Because car sales are moody. They swing hard with interest rates, with consumer confidence, with the economy in general. But cars need oil changes and brake jobs regardless of what the stock market is doing. Fixed operations is the department that doesn't panic during a recession. There's a specific number dealership owners obsess over here, called the service absorption rate. It measures what percentage of the dealership's entire fixed overhead, rent, utilities, taxes, administrative salaries, gets covered purely by the profit generated in parts and service. The industry sets a target of 115% absorption. Once you hit 100%, every single car sold on the showroom floor afterward becomes pure, unencumbered profit because the building's actual costs are already covered by the service bay. Most dealerships only manage somewhere between 64 and 69%. The ones that push past 100 are the ones quietly getting rich no matter what happened to car sales that month, and the labor structure behind that service bay is stranger than you'd expect. Technicians aren't paid by the hour they physically work. They're paid flat rate, meaning every job has a preset number of hours attached to it, regardless of how long it actually takes. If a brake job is booked at 3 hours, the technician earns 3 hours of pay whether they finish in 1 hour or 5. A skilled technician can bill 60 or 70 hours of labor inside a normal 40-hour week. For the dealership, this eliminates the risk of a slow mechanic costing them money. Labor cost is tied directly to work completed, not time on the clock. For the technician, it means good months are very good, and slow months can be brutal, with real burnout among younger apprentices who haven't built up speed yet. Now let's talk about what it costs to keep this entire operation running day to day, because the overhead here is relentless. Sales staff mostly work on commission, usually somewhere between 20 and 30% of the front-end profit on a given car. But before that commission gets calculated, the dealership takes a cut off the top called a PAC, an arbitrary internal number, say $500 or $800, deducted from the car's profit before the salesperson's percentage is even calculated. Sell a car with $2,000 of gross profit, apply a $600 PAC, and the salesperson's 25% commission only applies to the remaining $1,400. It's a quiet mechanism that guarantees the house always skims something first. When a deal is too thin to generate a real commission, the salesperson gets what's called a mini, a flat guaranteed payout, usually somewhere between $100 and $250, just so they don't walk away with nothing. Then there's the software. Every dealership runs on something called a dealer management system, handling everything from inventory to repair orders to financing paperwork. This market is essentially controlled by two legacy companies. Because switching systems is so disruptive, these providers can charge almost whatever they want. Base monthly fees typically run somewhere between $3,500 and $9,500, and integration fees for connecting outside marketing or customer software can exceed $32,000 a year. It's a quiet, unavoidable tax that every dealership pays just to keep functioning. Now let's talk about the price on the windshield, because it's not really the price. You negotiate against something called the manufacturer's suggested retail price, working your way down toward what you think is the dealer's actual cost, the invoice price. Except the invoice price is inflated on purpose by the manufacturer, usually by 1 to 3% of the sticker price. The dealer pays that inflated number using their floor plan credit. Then, after the car is sold, the manufacturer quietly refunds that 1 to 3% back to the dealer in a check called dealer holdback. Picture a $50,000 car with a 3% holdback. The dealer can sell that car at exact invoice price, look you dead in the eye, and still walk away with $1,500 in guaranteed profit you never saw on any piece of paper. You think you won the negotiation. The dealership already built the win into the math before you sat down. Then there's the documentation fee, the charge that supposedly covers the paperwork required to process your purchase. In heavily regulated states like California, that fee is capped at $85. In deregulated states like Florida, the average doc fee runs past $1,100. Same paperwork, same printer. Wildly different profit, depending entirely on which state drew the line. And once you're actually negotiating, the dealership uses a tool specifically built to keep you from doing math in your head. It's called the 4 square, split into 4 boxes. Your trade-in value, the purchase price, your down payment, and your monthly payment. Most buyers fixate entirely on that 4th box, the monthly number, because that's the one that hits their budget directly. The salesperson knows this and uses it. Want a higher trade-in value? Sure, but the loan term quietly stretches from 60 months to 72 or 84. Your monthly payment stays where you wanted it. The total interest you'll pay over the life of the loan climbs dramatically, and the dealership's margin stays fully protected. By tangling all 4 numbers together at once, almost nobody in that chair manages to optimize even a single one of them. Financing itself is close to being its own separate business hiding inside the dealership. Between the marked up interest rate, the warranty sales, and the reinsurance structures we already talked about, the finance office frequently earns the dealership more money than the actual sale of the car. And when a dealer group grows large enough, multiple stores, multiple brands, that reinsurance pool scales with it, feeding a captive insurance operation that can eventually generate more compounding wealth than the physical showrooms combined. None of this means the business is safe. It's leveraged from top to bottom, and leverage cuts in both directions, because almost the entire inventory on the lot is financed. An increase in interest rates doesn't just make cars more expensive for your customers, it directly increases what you're paying every single day just to hold your own inventory. Higher rates slow down buyers at the exact same moment they're raising your own carrying costs. It's a squeeze from both sides at once. Manufacturers can also blow up your business model with a single decision. In 2022, Ford told its dealer network that if they wanted to keep selling the company's electric vehicles, they'd need to personally invest somewhere between $500,000 and $1.2 million installing fast chargers and completing specialized training. Dealers pushed back hard, lawsuits were filed in at least 6 states, and consumer demand for electric vehicles came in far weaker than projected. By the middle of 2024, Ford scrapped the entire program and let every dealer sell EVs without the mandate. The dealers who'd already spent the money didn't get it back. There's also a constant undercurrent of regulatory risk. Rules requiring visible warranty disclosures on used cars, strict cybersecurity requirements to protect customer financial data, and lending laws that can turn a discriminatory rate markup or a hidden finance charge into a 6-figure fine and a lawsuit. None of these risks are exotic. They're the ordinary cost of operating a heavily leveraged, heavily regulated business. So how do experienced owners protect themselves against all of this? They stop owning one dealership and start owning several. A multi-store group can share one accounting office, one HR department, one customer service center, across every location, cutting overhead that a single store owner has to absorb alone. It gives them leverage to negotiate the software fees down. And critically, it diversifies risk. If one manufacturer has a terrible year, the group's other brands can carry the weight. Most importantly, it turbocharges the reinsurance model, because a group processing thousands of warranty contracts a month across multiple brands can feed a much larger captive insurance pool, generating investment returns that can eventually dwarf the profit of the actual showrooms. So, after all of that, what does a dealership actually make? The average franchise dealership pulls in close to $60 million a year in total sales and clears somewhere between 2 and 2.5% of that as net profit. The average front-end profit per vehicle sits around $2,000, and that number alone isn't close to enough. It has to be propped up by the finance office and the service department just to keep the lights on. The owner's official salary usually falls somewhere between $112,000 and $177,000 a year. That number looks almost ordinary, but it's a fraction of the real picture. Add distributions from dealership profit. Add rent, because many owners hold the actual land in a separate company and lease it back to their own dealership at a premium rate. Add dividends quietly flowing out of an offshore reinsurance company most customers will never know exists. Once all three of those layers stack together, total compensation for a successful owner routinely reach into the high six figures, and for the ones who expand into multiple stores, into the millions. So, is it worth it? This isn't a business for someone without serious capital, and it isn't passive income under any definition of the term. It demands millions of dollars in leveraged debt before you sell a single car, constant navigation through shifting regulations, and total dependence on decisions made by a manufacturer thousands of miles away who owes you nothing personally. You're managing technicians, running a high-pressure sales floor, negotiating wholesale logistics, and structuring offshore tax strategy, all inside the same building. But for the people who make it through that gauntlet, this turns out to be one of the most resilient business models in the entire economy. When new car sales freeze during a downturn, the service department keeps the business breathing. When front-end margins get squeezed by buyers with a phone full of competing quotes, the finance office and the holdback checks quietly cover the gap. The car on the showroom floor was never really the product. It was the entry point into a machine built to extract profit from every single stage of that vehicle's life, long after you've driven it off the lot.